human meets alien girl amid a broken signal beacon, uncovering a secret that changes everything. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. The planet was barren, a cold, desolate stretch of rock and ice, its only notable feature a broken signal beacon flickering weakly against the harsh wind. Commander John Harris, a seasoned space explorer, found himself on this forgotten world, the result of a distress call he'd answered days ago. The atmosphere was thin, barely breathable, and the cold seeped through every layer of his protective suit, making his every breath feel heavier. His mission was simple: investigate the malfunctioning beacon, repair it if possible, and report back. But as he trudged through the snow, the beacon flickered once more, only this time, it wasn't just static. Through the crackling signal, he heard a voice, faint but unmistakable. A woman's voice. He approached cautiously, knowing he was far from alone on this desolate world. The voice led him to an abandoned structure, half buried in the snow. Inside, among the debris, he found her. Zara. Her skin was a deep, iridescent blue, her long silver hair tangled and covered in frost. She was kneeling beside a control panel, trying in vain to repair the beacon. Her eyes, bright and sharp, locked onto his with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You're human?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "I didn't expect to see one of you out here." John hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I didn't expect to find anyone here either." Zara's gaze softened, and for the first time, John noticed the exhaustion in her posture, the way she barely held herself upright. She was hurt, badly, though she was trying to hide it. "I need help," she said quietly, as if saying the words out loud made them all the more real. John didn't hesitate. Without a second thought, he moved closer, offering her his hand. "Let me help you." She looked at him for a long moment, a mixture of uncertainty and vulnerability in her eyes. He could see the weight of her isolation, her suffering. She had been here alone, stranded and trying to survive. Zara didn't trust easily, and John knew it, but something in her eyes, something unspoken, told him she was just as desperate for help as he was for answers. Together, they worked on the beacon. As they repaired the damaged systems, Zara began to open up, telling John her story. She wasn't just an alien stranded on a distant planet, she was a member of a royal lineage, a powerful figure in her own right, but now, she was a fugitive, running from forces that would stop at nothing to see her captured. But there was more to her story. As the beacon finally came back online, a hidden message began to play, revealing a secret that would change everything for both of them. A conspiracy involving her people, the fate of entire civilizations, and a powerful force that could destroy them all. As the message unfolded, John realized that he hadn't just stumbled upon a broken signal beacon. He had discovered the key to a galaxy-spanning mystery, one that Zara was now a central part of. What began as a routine mission had turned into something far more dangerous, and far more important. John's world was about to change, and Zara's secret was just the beginning. John glanced at the now fully operational signal beacon, the faint hum of the device filling the otherwise silent room. Zara stood beside him, her figure silhouetted against the glow of the beacon, still and composed, though her eyes betrayed a sense of unease. They had just uncovered something far more significant than either of them had anticipated. The message had revealed a galactic conspiracy, one that could change the balance of power across the stars. As the last fragments of the transmission played out, a heavy silence settled between them. John had to process what he had just heard, the weight of it pressing down on him like an invisible force. He turned to Zara, his voice barely above a whisper. "What does this mean for you?" "For us?" Zara looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of judgment. "It means everything is about to change," she said quietly, her voice tinged with both fear and resolve. "My people, the Tan Dominion, have kept this secret for centuries. If it gets out, it could tear the galaxy apart. John's mind raced as he tried to make sense of the cryptic message. The Dominion's leaders, powerful as they were, had used their advanced technology to manipulate entire systems, twisting the fate of countless civilizations to suit their desires. Zara, it seemed, was the key to bringing the truth to light. But why had she been left here, alone, stranded on this barren world? "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" John asked, his tone softer now. Zara hesitated, her gaze flickering to the floor. "I couldn't trust anyone," she confessed. "Not after what happened. Not after I became a target." John's heart went out to her. She was a prisoner, but not in the traditional sense. Her own people had branded her a threat, an obstacle to their plans. Her royalty had become her curse. John reached out, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out together." Zara's eyes softened, and for the first time since they had met, a hint of a smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She nodded slowly. "Thank you, John." The storm outside had grown fiercer, the howling wind rattling the structure's fragile walls. The beacon's light flickered, casting an eerie glow over the room as Zara and John stood together, the weight of the galaxy now resting on their shoulders. They had no idea what awaited them next, but one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. As they made their way out of the building, the snowstorm raging outside mirrored the chaos they were about to face. Zara, once a symbol of power and pride, was now just a woman, vulnerable and determined, her fate intertwined with John's. Together, they would have to navigate the dangers that lurked ahead, trusting each other more with every step. As they reached the edge of the broken beacon, Zara glanced back, her face set with newfound determination. "The truth will come out," she said, her voice firm. "And we'll be ready." The journey ahead would not be easy, but John knew one thing for certain. There was no one else he'd rather face it with than Zara. And together, they would uncover the secrets that had been buried for far too long. The wind howled louder now, the swirling snow outside making the landscape almost indistinguishable from the sky. Zara and John stood at the edge of the broken beacon, the faint light from the device casting long shadows behind them. They knew the next steps wouldn't be easy. Their lives had already changed, but the true weight of their situation was only beginning to sink in. John turned to Zara, his breath forming a mist in the freezing air. "We need to get to a ship. Somewhere safe, where we can figure out what to do next." Zara nodded silently, her eyes scanning the horizon, as if she were already anticipating the dangers that lay ahead. She had lived through so much already, and now, as they set off into the snowstorm together, the thought of a future filled with uncertainty didn't seem as terrifying as it had before. "There's a station nearby," Zara said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. "We can use its communication relay to reach out to my allies. But it's not far. We'll have to move quickly." John didn't hesitate. He was used to the harsh conditions of space exploration, but this was different. With Zara by his side, he knew they could face whatever came their way. Together, they started moving, the snow crunching under their boots, the wind biting through their suits. The journey was grueling, but they pressed on, knowing what was at stake. As they made their way through the storm, John couldn't help but notice the way Zara moved. Despite the cold, despite her injuries, she was strong, determined. There was a fire in her that reminded him of his own resolve. She wasn't just some helpless alien in need of rescue, she was someone with a purpose, a mission. As they reached the station hours later, exhausted and freezing, Zara led them through a hidden access point, one only she seemed to know. Inside, the warmth was a relief, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, John could relax. The station's communication system was still operational, though barely. Zara immediately began working on it, her hands moving swiftly over the controls, bypassing security protocols with ease. "We're in," she said, her voice steady but a hint of anxiety creeping in. "Now we wait." John stood nearby, watching her as she worked, his mind racing with the implications of everything they had just uncovered. He had always been a man of action, but now, standing beside Zara, he found himself wondering how they could possibly take on the challenges ahead. As the minutes stretched into hours, the tension in the room built. Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "I don't know what will happen once we send this out," she said softly. "If my people find out I've contacted you, they'll stop at nothing to keep the truth buried." John nodded, his resolve hardening. "Then we'll make sure the truth gets out. No matter what it takes." Zara's gaze softened. "Thank you, John. I couldn't have done this without you." The connection went live. The message was sent. And with that, their journey had truly begun. As the lights in the room flickered and the storm raged outside, John realized that the next chapter of their lives was already unfolding, and there was no going back. They were in this together, no matter what the galaxy had in store for them. The station was quiet now, the hum of the communication systems the only sound that filled the room. Zara stood at the terminal, her fingers still hovering over the keys, eyes focused on the monitor as if waiting for some kind of confirmation. John watched her, his breath steady despite the tension building between them. The message had been sent, but they knew it was only the beginning. The storm outside had subsided, but the weight of what they had just done lingered in the air, thick and heavy. "It's done," Zara said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but John could hear the undertone of anxiety beneath it. "Now we wait." John nodded, stepping closer to her. "What happens next?" Zara turned to him, her expression unreadable for a moment. "Now, we see if anyone comes. If my people find out that I've contacted you, they'll stop at nothing to silence us." John's heart tightened at the thought. He had known from the start that this would be dangerous, but now it felt all too real. "We'll be ready," he said, his voice firm. "We've already come this far." Zara gave him a small, appreciative smile, but it was clear that her thoughts were elsewhere. She turned back to the terminal, her eyes scanning the screen as if willing it to do something more, to give them a sign, a clue that they were on the right path. The minutes stretched on, and John found himself pacing the small room, his mind racing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. What would happen when the message reached the right people? Would they be able to prevent the chaos from unfolding? Or would they become pawns in a game far beyond their understanding? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft beep from the terminal. Zara's head snapped up, and her fingers flew over the keys, calling up the new data that had just appeared. It was a response, but not from the allies she had hoped for. The message was encrypted, the sender untraceable. Zara's brow furrowed as she decoded it, her hands trembling slightly as the text came into view. "It's them," she said softly, her voice tight with disbelief. "They know." John felt a chill run down his spine. He had been prepared for something, but this was something else. The message wasn't just a response, it was a warning. A threat. Zara turned to him, her eyes wide with fear. "They're coming." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of what they meant. John's mind raced, but there was no time to think. "We need to move, now," he said, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the exit. "Where?" Zara asked, her voice barely a whisper. John didn't have an answer, but he knew one thing for sure: they couldn't stay here. Not now. Not with the stakes this high. "Anywhere but here," he said, his grip tightening. "We'll figure it out on the way." They moved quickly, their footsteps muffled by the thick walls of the station. Zara's mind was whirling, but in that moment, her focus was clear. They had a chance, just one, and they had to take it. They had no idea what awaited them, but they were about to find out. As they stepped into the cold night air, the stars above them seemed distant and indifferent, as if the universe was watching, waiting for their next move. And for the first time in a long while, Zara felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could do this. Together. John and Zara moved swiftly through the cold night, their footsteps leaving faint impressions in the fresh snow that had begun to fall again. The station's lights faded behind them as they navigated through the narrow path leading to the dense forest. Zara's mind raced with the message they had just received. Whoever had sent it clearly had the means to track them, to find them. She couldn't help but wonder how long they had before they were caught. The wind howled around them, the only sound breaking the eerie silence of the night. John stayed close, his presence a steady reassurance beside her. His movements were quiet, efficient, like a soldier in the field. Even though he was human, his ability to adapt to their environment had been impressive, and it gave her a sense of hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. "We need to reach the forest's edge," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a hidden path there that leads to a safe house. It should be secure." John nodded, not needing to ask questions. He had learned to trust her instincts. As they reached the edge of the forest, they paused briefly to catch their breath. The cold was biting, but it wasn't the weather that worried Zara, it was the sense that they were being watched. Her mind kept flicking back to the message they had received. A threat. A warning. Whoever had sent it knew about the transmission. Zara glanced around, her senses heightened, listening for any sign of movement. There was nothing. For now, they were safe. But for how long? John turned to her, his brow furrowed in concern. "What now?" he asked, his voice low. Zara took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. "We need to get to the safe house. If we can make it there, we can lay low for a while. Once we contact the right people, we'll have more options." She turned away, her eyes scanning the darkness. She wasn't sure how long it would take to reach the safe house, but every minute felt like an eternity. John moved forward, guiding her through the thickening trees. The snow was heavier now, the ground uneven, making it difficult to see where they were stepping. Every so often, John would glance back to make sure Zara was still following, his gaze filled with quiet determination. They had no map, no clear sense of direction, but Zara had been here before. She knew the land, and she knew that the safe house would be their best shot at survival. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the clearing where the safe house was hidden. It was a small, unassuming structure, nestled deep within the forest, surrounded by towering trees that offered both protection and camouflage. Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They were here. For the moment, they were safe. As they approached the door, John reached out to open it, but Zara stopped him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "We need to be careful," she warned. "If they've been tracking us, they may have already found this place." John nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. He glanced around, then stepped inside, his hand instinctively resting on his weapon. Inside, the safe house was sparse but functional. Zara moved toward the communications terminal, fingers moving quickly as she initiated the connection she hoped would provide the answers they desperately needed. "We'll get through this," John said softly, his gaze steady on her. Zara didn't respond, her attention fixed on the terminal. She had to believe he was right. Because if they didn't get through this, everything they had fought for would be lost. As the screen flickered to life, she saw the image of a familiar face appear on the monitor. "Zara," the voice said, soft but filled with authority. "It's time." Zara's heart skipped a beat. They had made contact. And now, the real fight was about to begin. The familiar face on the screen was a welcome sight, but the words that followed brought a heavy weight to Zara's chest. "Zara, it's time." The voice on the other end was calm, measured, but there was an urgency behind it that Zara couldn't ignore. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about the bigger picture, about exposing the truth and risking everything. She glanced at John, who stood silently by her side, his eyes focused on her. He was waiting for her next move, trusting her as always. The communication was coming through a secure line, one that only a few trusted allies had access to, but the words didn't reassure her. It wasn't just a message anymore, it was the beginning of the end of a long journey. "What do you need me to do?" Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper, betraying the apprehension she felt. "We need you to come to us, Zara." "We can't do this without you," the voice responded, and Zara could feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. She had spent years running, hiding, trying to keep her identity concealed, but now, it seemed there was no escape from the inevitable. John stepped forward, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. "We'll go together," he said quietly, as if to reassure her that she wasn't alone in this. Zara turned to him, her heart heavy with emotion. She had never asked for this, never wanted to be part of something so much bigger than herself, but now there was no turning back. The mission was clear, and it would take every ounce of courage and trust to see it through. "I don't know if I can do this," Zara admitted, her voice breaking for a moment as she fought to maintain composure. John gave her a small, understanding smile, his blue eyes filled with quiet determination. "You already are," he said, his voice steady. Zara nodded slowly, grateful for his unwavering support. "Okay," she whispered, looking back at the screen. "I'm in. What's the next step?" "We'll arrange for your transport," the voice replied. "But be prepared. It won't be easy, and there will be risks. The forces we're dealing with are powerful, and they won't hesitate to stop us. But this is the only chance we have." Zara's mind raced, and the weight of the decision seemed to settle over her once again. She had always known there was a chance she would have to face her past, but she had hoped for more time. The truth was that her very existence had been a secret, a carefully guarded one, and if her identity was revealed, it could cause chaos, not just for her, but for everyone involved. "I understand," Zara said, her voice steady now. "I'll be ready." She looked at John once more, his presence grounding her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of clarity. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They had no idea what awaited them, but they had each other, and that was enough. As the communication ended, Zara took one last look at the empty, cold landscape outside, knowing that it would soon be behind her. There was no turning back now. Together, they would walk into the unknown, ready to fight for a future that seemed so uncertain, but that they would shape with their own hands. The transport ship was small but fast, cutting through the vast expanse of space as it carried Zara and John to their destination. Zara sat in the cockpit, her hands clenched in her lap, trying to calm the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. John was beside her, his eyes focused on the instruments as they navigated through the void. The stars outside seemed to stretch and blur as they moved at faster-than-light speed, but to Zara, the journey felt like an eternity. She could feel the weight of the decision she had made, the consequences of her actions pressing down on her. This was it. They were about to confront the very people who had cast her aside, the same people who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. But in that moment, she wasn't alone. John's quiet presence beside her, his unwavering support, gave her a sense of strength she hadn't realized she needed. He had been with her every step of the way, even when she had doubted herself. "How much longer?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John glanced over at her, offering a reassuring smile. "Not long. We should be entering the station's orbit in a few minutes." Zara nodded, her heart racing. The station, an imposing structure in the vastness of space, loomed ahead, its metallic surface glistening against the backdrop of distant stars. As they approached, the reality of what was about to happen began to settle in. She was about to face her past, to confront the forces that had once controlled her life. But now, with John by her side, she had a sense of purpose she had never known before. They were in this together, and nothing, no secret, no threat, could change that. The ship's systems pinged, signaling that they were within range of the station. Zara's fingers hovered over the controls, her mind sharp and focused. She had prepared for this moment, but the unknown still lingered, like shadows waiting to pounce. As the ship docked, the airlock hissed open, and Zara felt the familiar pull of gravity as she stepped onto the station's cold, metallic floor. The dim lights of the station flickered overhead, casting long shadows along the empty corridors. There was no turning back now. They moved through the station with purpose, Zara leading the way. The silence was unsettling, the kind of silence that only came in places where secrets were kept hidden. The wall seemed to close in around them, and Zara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they reached a secure access point, Zara stopped, her breath coming in shallow bursts. "This is it," she said, her voice steady but tinged with anticipation. John nodded, his hand resting lightly on the weapon at his side. "We're ready," he said quietly. Zara turned to face him, her heart swelling with gratitude. They had made it this far, together, and she knew they could face whatever came next. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and they stepped into the heart of the station, ready to uncover the truth. What they didn't know was that their journey had only just begun, and the secrets they were about to uncover would change everything. The mission, once a simple act of survival, had now become a fight for the future, a fight they would face together, no matter the cost. As they moved deeper into the station, the air seemed to grow thicker, heavier with the weight of secrets. The metallic hum of the station's machinery echoed in the distance, but the hallways were eerily quiet. Zara could feel her heart pounding in her chest, each step taking them closer to the heart of the operation, where the truth lay buried. The dim lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting long, unnerving shadows along the walls. John stayed close by her side, his presence a steadying force in the midst of the unknown. Every so often, he would glance at her, his expression unreadable but filled with quiet determination. She knew he was ready as he could be for whatever was coming next. As they approached a large door at the end of the corridor, Zara slowed her pace, her breath coming in short, controlled bursts. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment when the past would collide with the present. The door was locked, but Zara didn't hesitate. She quickly accessed the security panel beside it, her fingers flying over the controls. The screen flickered for a moment before the door clicked open with a soft hiss. Beyond it was a large, sterile room filled with rows of servers and terminals, their blinking lights casting an eerie glow. It looked like any other part of the station, but Zara knew this room held the answers they needed. She stepped inside, followed closely by John. The door slid shut behind them with a soft thud, sealing them in. "This is it," Zara said, her voice barely a whisper as she surveyed the room. She moved to one of the terminals, quickly accessing the files stored there. The data appeared on the screen, but it was heavily encrypted. "I need a few minutes," Zara added, her tone focused. John nodded, keeping watch as Zara worked, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of movement. Time seemed to stretch on as Zara worked, her hand steady despite the tension building in the air. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the encryption cracked, and the screen lit up with the files they needed. Zara's eyes flickered over the data, her heart sinking with each new revelation. The files confirmed everything, the conspiracy, the manipulation, and the truth about the forces that had controlled her life. She scrolled through the documents, each one revealing more about the power struggle within the Tan Dominion, the dark secrets that had been kept hidden for centuries. As Zara absorbed the information, her mind raced with the implications. This was bigger than she had ever imagined. They were not just fighting for her survival, they were fighting to expose a corrupt system that had poisoned the galaxy for far too long. "We've got what we need," Zara said, turning to John, her voice tight with emotion. John stepped forward, his eyes locked on the screen. "What happens now?" Zara glanced at the data once more, then turned back to him. "Now, we send it. We make sure the galaxy knows the truth." As she initiated the transmission, she knew there was no going back. They had taken the first step, but the road ahead would be dangerous. The storm they had started would not end quietly. As the files were sent, Zara felt a mix of fear and relief. They had done it. The truth was out. But she also knew that this was only the beginning. Whoever controlled the galaxy's secrets would stop at nothing to silence them. And now, they were marked. As they left the room, Zara took one last look at the terminal. The mission was far from over, but they had made their stand. Together, they would face whatever came next, ready to fight for the future they had just started to build. The ship's engines hummed steadily as John and Zara made their way through the corridors of the station, the weight of their mission still heavy on their shoulders. The data they had sent was just the beginning, but the consequences of exposing the truth were still unknown. Zara's mind raced as they moved, every step bringing them closer to the unknown. They had cracked the system, but now, the forces who had hidden these secrets would be coming for them. The silence between them was filled with a shared understanding. They were no longer just survivors, they were fighters. "We need to get to the escape pods," Zara said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. John nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Do you think they'll come for us right away?" Zara looked at him, her eyes sharp. "They will. We've made ourselves targets now. We need to be ready." They quickened their pace, moving through the maze-like hallways, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Every corner they turned felt like they were being watched, but they pressed on, trusting their instincts. As they neared the escape pod bay, Zara's hand instinctively went to the weapon at her side. The station was eerily quiet now, the usual hum of machinery replaced by an unsettling stillness. "Do you think they know we're here?" John asked, his voice low. Zara didn't answer immediately. She wasn't sure. The truth was, they were playing a dangerous game now, one where the stakes were higher than ever. "We'll find out soon enough," she said finally, her voice tight with determination. They reached the escape pods, the cold metallic doors sliding open with a hiss. Zara stepped inside, followed closely by John. As the doors sealed behind them, the tension between them grew. The pod was small, designed for emergency evacuations, and the controls were simple. Zara quickly initiated the launch sequence, her fingers flying over the buttons. "This is it," she said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "Hold on." The pod detached from the station with a sudden lurch, and they were thrown into the vast emptiness of space. Zara could see the station growing smaller behind them, the distant stars twinkling in the blackness of space. For a brief moment, they were free. But they both knew that freedom would be short-lived. The forces they had just exposed would stop at nothing to track them down. "Where do we go now?" John asked, his voice barely audible over the low hum of the pod's engines. Zara didn't hesitate. "We go to the nearest system. We lay low, regroup, and figure out our next move. We can't let them catch us." As the pod sped through space, Zara sat back in her seat, her eyes focused on the stars ahead. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. They had made their stand, but now, they had to survive long enough to see it through. The galaxy was vast, and the truth they had uncovered was dangerous. But together, they would fight for it. They would keep moving forward, no matter the cost.